On this episode of the Home Studio Hangout podcast, we have Steph Trivison joining us from Chapel Hill, North Carolina. Steph is an incredible songwriter and producer who primarily works in sync licensing, but also works with artists as well. We talk about how she got started in the sync licensing world.
You have to be careful to not write a quote-unquote sync song.
Some of the really cool opportunities that have come her way.
I never thought I would be in a video game, you know?
And she answers the big question.
How did you figure out how to pitch it? Like, who did you pitch it to?
Well, that's a good question.
Welcome back to the Home Studio Hangout podcast. I am your host, Drew, here with my co-host, Josh. Say hi to the people, Josh.
Hi.
And that is all he ever does is hi. Today, we have a guest with us, Steph Trivison from Chapel Hill, North Carolina. Steph, we're excited to have you here with us today and just to chill.
Thank you. I'm excited to be
Talk
here.
shop for an hour. So, Steph, maybe just kind of for the people who don't know you, give kind of like an overview of who you are, what you do, and then we'll kind of go from there.
Yeah. So I kind of started as a songwriter. I played in bands for years. And over the last probably 4 or 5 years, I've started really getting into production and sync licensing. I've licensed I've had probably hundreds and hundreds of placements. I've done maybe 150 songs in the last 2 or 3 years, many of which have fortunately been placed in TV shows or in commercials. So that's been a focus of mine for the last few years. And then within the last year, I started producing artists. So, always evolving, but really like to be hands-on in all things music.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
And so you told us you were originally from the Midwest. So what was let's maybe start growing up in the Midwest. How did you get into the whole music thing? Was it like a band? Did you start singer-songwritering yourself as you were a kid and then how did you move from that into production?
Yeah, well, so it started super, super early because my dad is a musician and his dad was a musician. So it was in the DNA, always in the house. My dad was in rock bands. I mean, he kind of grew up on Zeppelin and Queen, and he was doing a lot of cover bands in and around Cleveland. And so it was there. There's a photo of me when I was 2 or 3 with a little red plastic guitar and a microphone. And clearly I just already have the passion for this thing. But he had one of those Tascam 4 tracks in the basement.
Oh, yeah.
And so I would watch him kind of record stuff and try to do it myself. And I made very stupid songs, 6, 7 years old, just trying to record and write. And that evolved when I was a teenager. I started to get a little bit more serious about it. And I was in pop punk kind of bands or pop rock bands. And all through my 20s played in some rock bands. And I think the transition to production was really just out of necessity. I had ideas for all of the parts. I didn't want to just write a song on a guitar. So, which was my primary instrument. So I wanted to put together demos essentially. And so I had GarageBand and I just kind of little by little learned how to produce. But I had the foundation of, I got a drum set when I was 8. I had a guitar when I was 9. I was in the school band, I played all kinds of instruments. So I had the foundation of just knowledge of a lot of different instrumentation.
Yeah.
And I think that really helped with that process.
Yeah, I did. So I did college for 2 years and then I dropped out because I was I don't want to teach. But because I was in a teaching type educational program, that it required me to learn every instrument type. And I will say that that's been massively helpful in production, or being able to just if I need to hire out a strings violinist or cello or whatever, I can notate it to exactly them, and it's easier on them because they don't have to do it, and they're always appreciative of that as well. Do you find that that kind of comes into play with you as far as having this broader breadth of instruments kind of going into production?
Yeah, I think it's what you want. better. You know, I think if you can't describe an instrument or like the sound you're going for, then it's just going to make production more cumbersome. I mean, you might eventually figure out like, oh, actually what I'm hearing is an oboe, but without that knowledge, I think it just is going to take you longer to get there. So I find that it's been really helpful. And in fact, like, yeah, being in sort of a wind ensemble type band in school, I just hear arrangement differently, I think, than if I didn't have that kind of education. So
That
it's helpful.
that happened to me a couple months ago. We really wanted trumpets in the song, and so I was like, I'm trying to program the trumpets, and like programmed horns rarely sound good,
Right.
you know. And so I call up my friend who plays trumpet. I was like, "Can you cut trumpets for me?" He's like, "Sure." Send me the parts. I sent him the parts. He calls me and he's like, "You didn't write these like a trumpet player." I was like, "Then just do whatever you want," and it turned out 10 times better. Because like I mean, like I don't know, like in school, you know, I was doing percussion, and so like that's like my wheelhouse. It's so much easier for me to like hear something and immediately program it versus, you know, with like specifically any sort of horn or like wind instrument. I don't understand what the thought process is
Yeah.
behind those parts.
Well, it's interesting how like your experience weaves into that. I was once told by a producer when I was in a band like 10 years ago, he was like, you play guitar like a drummer. Like he thought that the way I
Yeah.
played was just very percussive, very rhythmic. And it's like, yeah, all of your little influences, what you've learned, that's what's going to color how you write and produce. It's interesting.
Yeah, I whenever I was really into metal, there was a band called Monuments, and I remember I was listening to the guitarist of that band. His name is John Brown. He was talking about how like people were asking him like, "How do you come up with such interesting parts?" He's like, "Well, I like to view the guitar as a percussion instrument instead of, you know, like a melodic instrument," and that like kind of blew me away at the time because I was like, "Whoa, like we could play instruments like with different intentions,"
Right.
you know? And so that's been that's something that I still think about to this day. I think the rhythm of parts is still more important than most of the melodies that come out of them.
Yeah, I think we had we had a similar conversation with, I think it was Shane, where we were like, I think producers or like songwriters should learn some sort of like drum percussion instrument.
He was a drummer, right?
Yeah, because he was a drummer,
Yes.
and like
Yeah.
you
He
came
was the
up as a
first drummer
drummer.
on the podcast,
Yeah,
and I
he
was
was
really excited.
and like you came up as
Yeah.
a drummer, and like I've only started like physically putting my hands on drums in the last like 2 years, and I feel like it has made my sense of groove and rhythm and the way parts work together just so much better.
Right.
In
Yeah.
general, just kind of in general, regardless of instrument.
It's more natural, right? Like sometimes if I'm just like programmed, because everything I do is in the box. I don't have any outboard gear. I don't have any drums in here or whatever. So if I'm like programming drums, sometimes it feels too inhuman, right? And I will actually like air drum to like figure out what is it that I'm trying to do here. If I were actually playing this live, how would this feel sound or whatever? And I find that has been incredibly helpful to make it sound more human.
For sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So getting into like production stuff, how did you get into what kind of got you into the sync world?
Yeah.
Because like that's not a normal lane to fall into when you're like, oh, I want to produce music.
Right. Well, I had been even in like through all of the bands I was in, I've been writing these like really poppy hooks, you know, like these really sing along, catchy, anthemic kind of things. And I had written one song called Pacifica in a band I was in called These Knees. And someone, I don't know if you guys remember Jukebox the Ghost, but there was this band, Jukebox the Ghost, and they had like a manager type figure who reached out and said, you know, that could be a Target commercial. Like that hook could be a commercial. And that was the first time I ever really thought, oh, I could be the person who writes for that kind of, you know, for placements.
Yeah.
And then years, you know, fast forward years past that, that was always in the back of my mind. And I had a friend who said, you know, like there's all these great hype songs for like men's sporting events, but there's none for women's sporting events. And I was an athlete growing up, and she was like, you should like create the hype song for like a women's sporting event. So I wrote this song called Outlaw, and I pitched it to the national. That was an unintentional pun. I pitched it to the National Professional Fast Pitch League.
Nice.
And they took it right away. They were like, yes, we want to use this. And they started using it in their broadcasts. And I was like, oh, well, this is like one for one, like check. I've pitched something and it was used. And it felt like maybe I have something here. So then the engineer I was working with at the time, he and I kind of sold that song to a library, and they got it placed in an Amazon Prime ad in India, and it was like a 3-minute cut to picture kind of placement, like really using moments from the song to align with these big
Yeah.
moments in the ad. And at that point, I was like, okay, this is like a path for me. I think I need to really like shift into this world. But yeah, really, it was born out of just like kind of being drawn to writing catchy stuff.
That's super
Gotcha.
cool. I
Yeah.
feel like there's like a learning curve for a lot of people who try to get into sync. I think you're the first person I've heard of where it was like, yeah, it just kind of like it was just natural.
Well, it
You know,
was
that's super sick.
I,
I mean, like it makes sense. Like that's like the type of people that should be doing sync are the people who are like naturally good at it, you know?
yeah.
And
I think there was
that's really cool.
for a while there was this like feeling of, oh, if you write songs for TV, you're a sellout, you know? And I didn't really come with any like preconceived feelings of like, oh, if I do this, people are going to like think I'm corny or whatever. It's just like, no, I just want to make music. And I was someone who liked all types of, I mean, I was listening. So I was a late 80s kid, an elder millennial. And so I came up listening to, like Taking Back Sunday and The Used. And I was like
Yeah.
right
Yeah.
on that emo wave. But I also really love pop music. You know, it's just a mix. And growing up, I was influenced by like the Beach Boys. And I already mentioned
Yeah.
my dad listened to Queen. So it's all these wild influences. And I just want to be able to recreate what I hear. So I think like all of the elements kind of naturally came together to be someone who could produce music, because it was just like all there and I just had to reach for it, you know?
That's really
Yeah.
interesting.
So I'm
Go
really
ahead, Josh.
curious about you getting the first placement.
Mm-hmm.
How did you figure out how to pitch it? Like who did you pitch it to? You know?
Well, that's a good question. Fortunately for me, the National Professional Fast Pitch League at the time was like a relatively small league. And so they were run by just a small group of people.
Okay.
And there was a team in Akron. I was living in Cleveland. There was a team in Akron. I had seen them play. I played softball myself growing up. And so I like used that as an in. But I also had a friend who made a film about the league. And that film won Best Documentary at the Cleveland International Film Festival, whatever year it came out. And so I like used all my connections. I was like, hey,
Gotcha.
love you guys, love the league. I'm an athlete. I was a shortstop. I like,
Gotcha.
put my little,
Mm.
like, laid out my
Story back
cards
in there.
essentially.
You
And
pitched hard. Yeah.
yeah. And then I was like, I know Danielle who made the documentary on you guys. Like, I'd love to, if you have a need for it, I'd love to write a song for you that's about the league. That's about like athletes, female athletes. So they were like super into it. And then, in fact, I've actually had a couple opportunities with them since. The woman that ran that league has since moved on to another league called Athletes United Unlimited. And so I did like a hip hop song with Essence Carson, who was a WNBA champion. And it was like for a basketball season. So like
Yeah.
that has continued over the years. That relationship has continued.
That's
That's
super
very
cool.
Yeah.
cool. Yeah, that's super. I mean, that's just like shotgun blast your way in. You know what I mean? Like, just freaking go for it. Yeah. So we had. I like to hear like different people's experience with sync, because like, so we had our buddy Stephen Keach on, who does like more cinematic stuff. And he kind of came from the world of, I don't know if you know him, but he comes from the world of like he worked at Soundstripe whenever they were a startup. So he was one of their on staff guys. And so like he was saying like his experience with sync is very different from a lot of people's experience with sync, because he came from a band called Haste the Day, and then he was kind of doing some sync work and then writing some stuff on the side, and then basically got a job at a sync house as their on staff guy. And so like that kind of skews his view a little bit
Yeah.
on like how getting into it works. So I would love to hear like how are you getting your stuff? Like, who are you sending it to? How are you getting your stuff placed? Are you pitching to libraries, or are you having somebody pitch on your behalf? Because I know both of those are options.
Yeah.
Are they original music, or is it your original music, or is it artists that you produce for, or is it like buyout situations?
Mm-hmm.
That's a lot of questions. So maybe
That's a ton of
It's
questions.
all of
that's a
the
ton of
above.
questions. Yeah.
So I had the sort of great fortune of being paired up with someone who was already in the sync world. So I had like my, a little taste of the success, right?
Yeah.
And the guy that I did Outlaw with, his name is Jim Stewart. He's an engineer, mix engineer, and producer out of Cleveland. He knew a guy who was already like firmly planted in the sync world. His name's Chris Harris, but he goes by DJ Skrilla. And Chris had recently started essentially like a production library, production team called Mayhem Music. And so through that connection with Jim, I was able right away to like get into that world in a bigger way because I knew someone who could pitch my music on my behalf, and we collaborated. So he had part of Mayhem Music is the other partner is Dan Solovitz. Dan's a producer full time. And so Dan they put together a couple of songs that I top lined. And the first one that we did was placed for a Men's Warehouse commercial. And
Nice.
so like right away we had success. So they continued
Yeah.
to partner with me. And that's been like a theme of mine, is really like trying to take advantage of my opportunities, understanding when opportunities are in front of me and trying to take advantage. But yeah, I worked with those guys, and I would recommend to anybody who's trying to get into the space, if you can build a relationship with someone who has already done it, like that gets you part of the way there. And then you can learn from them and kind of like build that on your own.
That is extremely valuable. I feel
Yeah.
like especially like if you grew up in a place where you don't have a lot of options for like collaboration. Like growing up in Pittsburgh, there were like 3 studios and none of them would ever need help. So I didn't really have anybody to like sit down and like show me the ropes, and like until I was much further along and I thought I was really good, and then I moved to Atlanta and then I realized I wasn't that good.
Yeah. Right.
And yeah, that's definitely the right path.
Well, there's no, in a place like Pittsburgh, in a place like Cleveland, there's no industry. There's no like, you don't have labels, you don't have agents, you don't have publishing. You're not getting publishing deals based out of Cleveland, right? And like I hate to say that because they are good. These are both good music towns, but it's just that infrastructure is not there. So you have to figure out the ways to get your foot in the door that make sense for you. So yeah, I did that, but a lot of those relationships, or a lot of that partnership was top lining tracks that they already had. So they would put together a record and they'd say, okay, we're doing this pop record and we're going to hire Steph to do 4 of the songs on it. So we did a lot like that. And then as as like the placements grew with them, I was able to, folks started reaching out to me directly, and they would say like, this is something that we heard from you that we like and we want you to do it for us. So it's just kind of built on itself from there.
Gotcha.
Cool.
So it just starts to it starts to feed into itself after that.
Right.
So what are some of the just brag on yourself real quick. What are some of the coolest like placements that you've got, or at least that you feel that you've got, that have been like either momentous or just meant a lot to you or just kind of cool?
Well, yeah, that Amazon one, because it was just like this initial kick down the door moment of like, whoa, I could do this. That stands out. I got my first video game a couple years ago. That was kind of cool.
That's sick.
Yeah,
Which game?
I was in the game is called Life is Strange.
I love that game.
Yeah, I'm not like a gamer, I don't really play, but I recognize the significance of it, and I have a lot of friends who are into it.
That's a big indie game, actually. That's a really big indie game.
Yeah, and so in the game, there's like it's apparently like I don't know. I don't even see. This is how little I know about video games. I don't know the language, but it's like this sort of spin-off video game that focuses on a character named Steph, who is like she's like a DJ or something. She like owns a record store. And my song plays while she's in the record store in a couple different ways. And it's like it's prominent. Like there's she walks to her booth and like all you hear is my voice in the bridge. So that was cool too, just because I was like, I never thought I would be in a
Yeah.
video game, but I've had like a bunch of like, I got Netflix spots and like cable
Yeah.
network spots, all kinds of different things. I was just hired last year to be like the voice of a new Care Bear.
That's
So like,
sick.
it's random, it's
That's
wacky,
super sick.
but yeah, it's all fun for me.
Yeah. Oh, so when did you get so when was the year of that first initial like beginning of your sync journey?
Yeah, that would have been, so that placement on Amazon was like 2020, and then when I pitched to the professional fast pitch league, that was 2019.
Okay, so not even that long ago.
Not super
Yeah.
long. But again, like I had that boost of being able to build a relationship with someone who's already kind of been there, done that. So that kind of like
Sure.
gave me a turbo boost to my sync career.
Mhm.
It's also a testament to like one, your work ethic, but number two, like the ability that you get a couple good things and then you don't sit on them and you like keep going and you push past it. Like
Big
it
time.
will compound very fast
Yeah.
and turn into something like significantly bigger.
Well, and that's the thing is like, from those first placements, a company called Score Production Music in London reached out and we did a whole record together, and that's got a bunch of placements, and then another company heard about that. So yeah, it can really snowball, and I think you have to be ready and willing to kind of take advantage of those opportunities. But it's a lot of hard work too, and I'm someone who has like, I have a full-time day job.
Yeah.
So like balancing the two is, it can be tough, but
That's crazy. That
yeah,
is insane that
yeah,
you have that you balance that. That's what does your schedule look like? My gosh.
it's intense. It's very intense. It's not like super blocked out all the time, but
Sure.
I definitely like carve out moments to say like, okay, I'm focusing on this right now, so,
So maybe like to somebody who wants to get into that world,
yeah.
and that has never gotten started, but they know enough about production to like maybe build their own song. Um, what would you say to that person of like, what are some best practices on maybe crafting syncable
Mm,
music, or maybe like from more of the music perspective,
yeah.
like what are some tips that you maybe could give those people that are kind of wanting to foray but don't really know like how to write a song for sync?
Yeah. Well, a couple things. I think you have to be careful to not write a quote unquote sync song, because like
Sure.
I think what people are really looking for is authenticity and emotion, and like that's what's going to help drive a scene, or the commercial or whatever it is you're working on. So you don't want it to feel like
Yeah.
production music, or like a song that was made for sync. Um, so it still has to come from a place of authenticity, I think. But the format is different. Especially if you're working with a library, when you make songs, you don't need to make 4-minute opuses. You can hit a 2-minute, 30-second song and hit some like key moments or some key. You want like impacts throughout the song. You want big
Mm-hmm.
changes so that different parts of the song can be used for different scenes, or that they can like sort of cut and mix things together differently. So a lot of emotion, variety within the song itself, big hits and stuff. If you can have like impacts in certain big moments, that is good to cut to for editing, video editing purposes. But yeah, know that like you don't have to create this like, this doesn't have to be Bohemian Rhapsody. This is like a
Sure.
2.5-minute sync song. So
Yeah.
there's a blend. You got to make it feel real though.
For sure. Do you find that because I know you have some YouTube stuff
Mm-hmm.
out. Have you found that like you dabbling in getting into video editing has actually helped maybe make some of those beats, like the way you approach some beats in music, actually feel better?
Yeah, I think like from the YouTube perspective, maybe not quite as much because I'm just doing like tutorials
Sure.
or whatever. But I do think going back to the what we were talking about with really knowing a wide range of instruments being valuable for production, I also think being a well-rounded creative is really valuable, especially today. Like, you know, if you
Mm-hmm.
want any traction on social media, you have to be a video editor. You have to think about like, you know, writing skits, and whether that's silly or not, like that's kind of the environment that we're in. Um,
Yeah.
and I think back to being a kid, and my brother and I would like make fake commercials. We had a video, like one of those over the shoulder video cameras in the 90s,
Hmm.
and we would just make like commercials for chocolate milk, you know, like always thinking very creatively, video focused, visually focused. So I do think there's a lot of value in like being that kind of well-rounded creative, because it does get you thinking like, okay, if I'm going to write this song and it's going to be a sports song, I need to make sure that there's these moments of impact. So like people swinging a bat, you know, right when the ball
Hmm.
hits, they can cut to that. Um, yeah, just thinking differently about that is important, I
I
think.
think me and Josh had a conversation about that with somebody, and we were talking about how, like, I think having good hobbies and like good side things that you do, like, can actually affect how you become a better producer. Like, I think we
Mm-hmm.
were, what, Josh, we were talking about like Dune. I think that's what we were talking about. We were talking about like having some sort of thing where like that can, I've been getting into like reading a bunch of high fantasy. So like that shapes like my visual mind so that maybe when I'm writing a song that needs to feel like that, I have like more of a scope for like, you know, an imagery or something like that that can feed into the music aspect.
Yeah, and I like sometimes I'll put together kind of like a mood board or something, you know, if I know that I'm writing for a very specific purpose or to a brief or something, I'll say, okay, like what is this scene that exists on a Netflix show that I love? You know, let me go find that scene and make sure that when I mute it and play my song over it, it works within the context of that. Like using that kind of visual stuff I think is really helpful for sync.
For sure. Um have you, excuse me. Have you are you mainly doing custom work at this point and custom briefs at this point, or are you doing micro licensing as well?
Well, so a lot of what, like I was saying before, a lot of like the projects that I'm getting are just based on my past experience, and so like
Hmm.
they're it's custom in that some folks are reaching out and saying, "Hey, we want a record from you."
Yeah.
But there's no hard and fast brief typically. I know a lot of
Okay.
folks like that's their world. They get the brief, they create to it. I've done it a couple times, but
Yeah, I have some friends that that's like their world.
yeah, but like fortunately, I think fortunately for me,
Yeah.
the opportunities have been more like, hey, we like what you do. We see that it's working. Make something that works for us, you know. And it's kind of like I have free, you know, I have control over what that looks
That's
like.
great.
Yeah, and
That's really great.
I make sure that it fits within their catalog, and that it is like we
Yeah.
have conversations like, what are you looking for? How can I like best fit what I do into what you're missing? Um, but yeah, other
Yeah,
than that,
I
it's kind
I
of free
don't
reign.
like the brief thing. That's always kind of scared me away. It's
Yeah.
like I don't feel like spending time for free in hopes that like I get a shot. It makes it feel like everybody is just kind of like treated as a commodity,
Mm-hmm.
you know? And it's like obviously like there's somebody on this email list who is the best fit for this project and like y'all are just too lazy to like figure out who it is, you know?
Yeah.
And so like I've never been a big fan of it because of that. And but I think the type of work that you're getting where people are hitting you up because they're like, "Oh, you do this one thing, you know, and we want that thing." That's great. You know, that's what happened to I know a guy in LA who does sync primarily. And that's kind of like how he got his start. He was producing like rock and metal bands in the 90s, and then when LimeWire came out, he was like, "Well, I can't develop artists and make a ton of money every time I get them a record deal anymore. So I'm going to swap over to like the sync world." And so he'll do like library placements with like APM, but you know, he's getting hit up by music supervisors directly to, you know, create for shows. And so he started getting into scoring. And like I think that that world is super super cool because it's a completely different dynamic, you know, to really any other part of music.
Yeah. Well, it's great to have those direct relationships. Like you become really in control of your own, career and destiny. And I think, you'll hear a lot of folks talk about like, you can't have a plan B, like music needs to be your thing. But what I'll say is like having a full time job has allowed me to be really choosy or to say
Mm-hmm.
like, I don't have to chase after briefs. I'll just let whatever projects are going to come. And if I can take it, great. And like it's less about like the financial thing and more about like, do I want to do this project? And that's been kind of freeing as well. But anytime, like for the listeners, anytime you can get in a relationship with someone where you become their go-to, or you're a part of their like short list of composers or whatever, like you're in a pretty good position there.
I mean, yeah, that's true for regardless of what area of music production you're in. Like even with bands, like being a go-to, like I have a handful of bands that I'm like their guy. Josh and Lee, because they have a production team, they have like a handful of projects that they're like the go-to guys for.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, it just provides a weird level of consistency that is like at least a handful of times per year you're going to get hit up by these people, and so you can bank on like probably getting some work off of them, which is pretty cool.
Right.
I think what you said before is really really important too. Something me and Josh have touched on before, because Josh also has a regular job, and it's super important, I think, for people that are just getting into the music production world and like studio stuff and trying to do this thing, that it's not one or the other, like, and both is a very viable option, and is honestly more
It's better.
viable. It's better for the most part.
It's
Like you don't have
better.
the stress.
Yeah. And it's better for the exact reasons that she said. Like, you don't have to take terrible work just to pay your bills. You could focus on the things that are going to be great on your portfolio and the projects that are going to get you more work. And because for the longest time, like I had a okay portfolio, but then it was attracting like okay work. So like this year I literally turned off my website and I was like, I'm fixing this.
Mm-hmm.
I'm fixing this, And yeah, I mean, I think that that's definitely the best way to like build a career, especially like seeing how things are like in today's climate where like everything is so content focused that there's like this pressure to like every project that I work on, like I feel like I have to be able to like show everybody it.
Right.
And so like if you take, 4 projects in a row that like aren't really something that you want to show people, like now you have all this dead space in time and like people forget about you.
Yeah. Right. I think you got to like look at your life. What do you want out of your life? And then build a music career that works for that. It's
Yeah.
like it doesn't have to be it can be any variety of, all these options can come together and build exactly what you want, but you have to get clear on what does work for you.
Hmm.
I think people would probably be surprised at how many people that are full-time in music that have like another thing.
Yeah.
Like I think uh, unless you're at like the top, most people have like a secondary thing that they do, and it may not be like a normal 9 to 5, but like I don't like I have music, but I also have like a side thing that I do of like I develop podcasts for people, and like that's really cool. That brings in an extra thing. That's technically a different job.
Right.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But
I
like,
think it's just important to do other things
yeah,
to get you out of that headspace. I do broadcasts for a church here in town, which is really cool. They're like, yeah, I didn't know what I was getting into. I was hesitant to like start working at a church, and they're like the band that plays every week is like a bluegrass band.
Oh, wow.
It's so sick. Like I never mixed a steel guitar in my life
Right.
before I did that. I also never touched a console. And so like now it's like live sound stuff is available to me, which is pretty cool. And so I don't know, just like sitting down and like figuring out how to mix like a bluegrass band every Sunday in like a semi live environment is really cool, because then whenever I sit down and I'm like making something in Ableton, it's totally different. And I think it's important just to have other things that get you out of it. Like I know guys who have hits who are working with small artists for free just because it's fun,
Right.
you know? It's like, well, if you can't afford my big rate, then like I'll just do it for free because like I love the project so much that it'll be fun. You know, I think that that's like kind of the reoccurring theme that I see like with like the most successful people. It's like you have to do other things to like stay fresh and stay motivated to make you know, impactful art.
Hmm.
So what was the transition, at least in your mind, like going from full sync to like, I want to start producing bands. I think I want to start inviting other people into this process. What was that kind of like thought process for you?
Well, I don't want to make it sound like I'm just flying by the seat of my pants, but that was another thing that was just like, hey, Steph, I like what you've done. Can you do it for me? And so I had a couple people who just reached out over kind of the same period, and I think they saw the stuff I was posting and that I was getting placements. You know, it was almost like a Instagram was like a portfolio, right? And
Yeah.
so I think they're seeing that, and they're like, well, I want that. And you've done it, so can you do it for me? And so it just evolved as like, oh yeah, I haven't really like produced anything other than stuff for me, so why don't I try this, right? And then it's like, oh, we put out a couple songs and those were okay, so then more, more people hear that. So it's just much like sync, it's kind of just snowballed into like, and snowball is like maybe too intensive a word. I'm still only producing a handful of people. I can't balance all of it. So
Yeah.
um but
Capacity issues there.
yeah, but like it is, that is growing. And just worked, just finished a track for an artist, and she reached out. I actually haven't even emailed her back yet. And I'm sharing here on the podcast, but she reached out, was like, hey, can you do an EP for me? And like, I just see it kind of building in those ways. And it's fun for me to help other people kind of bring their vision to life. Like that's an exciting challenge. And it's cool to like step out of my own world. I try different things because it's for them. It's not for like my artist career or my sync career.
And you view that pretty different. I mean, that's going to be because they're giving you a new framework in which to work, which is like creatively extremely fulfilling.
Right.
Like they're going to give you ideas. They're going to come with ideas. You're like, oh, I would have never done that. Oh,
Yeah.
I would have never used that melody or this chord progression, or oh, that feels kind of cool, or this instrumentation choice is really weird. Like I probably would have gone differently, but like, yeah, let's go down this lane and kind of see where we end up at, and you end
Right.
up somewhere very different, and that's going to feed back into your own stuff as well. Like later down the line, I'm sure like you get hit up for a certain genre and you're like, well, I'm going to use this trick, this trick, this trick, this trick that I did for these 5 artists, and now you have an even fresher, more interesting maybe sound for your sync stuff that you probably wouldn't have had you not started delving into that world.
Yeah. Right. And how do you take those like little tricks that you learn and just tweak them a bit every time so that it's, so that it doesn't like become, I mean, there are certainly producers who have kind of like a stamp or like something that they do that everybody expect, the 4 count Pharrell thing or whatever. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, okay, that exists, but how do you change it up so that you've got that variation too?
Yeah. Me and Josh were talking about this, I think last week. We were doing a thing and somebody was, he was in a Discord and he was having a whole, I mean, Josh, you could probably explain it better than I can because it was your whole bit, but how this guy was like, he found out that a guy used like, he got a song
I got it.
fully,
I
yeah.
got it. Okay, all right. I got this. I got the receipts too. Okay, so there is this whole thing where apparently some mixer in Nashville, like I have a friend that I trust who said that he witnessed a very popular mixer in Nashville take tracks from an artist team, load them into his template, and immediately hit render without even listening to it and send it out. And a lot of people had problems with this.
And and it got cleared. That's the crazy
and it
part.
got cleared.
Wow.
Yeah. And there's a lot of different angles to talk about with this, but in short, this one dude hops in and he's like, in my 40s, I don't really have a problem with that. Because like whenever I was in my 20s, like I would often like look at things like that and basically just be like, I would never do that. Like, I would never take that project. I would never do this. I would never do that. Like, that's not me or whatever. And, now he feels like, why wouldn't I do that? Why wouldn't I try to get bigger opportunities, even if it's not something that like I'm wholeheartedly like in love with,
Yeah.
And that's something I've been thinking about a lot this year, because like 2 years ago I said like I'm not doing rock or metal anymore, and like I just like the very first label project that I worked on this year was rock metal. And I feel like because I'm so far removed from the genre, and because I don't know what's hot and I don't know the trends and I don't know like what gets A&Rs excited in the rock space, I felt like my ideas were really valued by the band, whether it was my melodies or cadences or production moves or whatever, because like I wasn't chasing anything. I was only chasing like something that was like that I thought was like objectively good,
Right.
And so that's what we were talking about last week, is like kind of like the idea of
Not saying never,
yeah,
asking why.
yeah, basically just being like why not, like why can't we do this thing,
Or even asking like, why would that guy do that? Like, what's the purpose behind that?
because it works.
Because
I
it
mean,
works. If
there's
he's
also
that
this
confident
thing.
and it clears, who are you to say that he's wrong?
Yeah. Right.
There's also this thing with mixing where like there's been so many cases of like young mix engineers like killing mixes, and then some dude like Manny or Serban gets their mix cleared even though it's not as good. And it's simply because like it's so much easier to pay somebody this fee and with a massively proven track record and then know that it's good, and it happens all the time. And it's like, I don't know, I don't like the fact that some dude just like rendered out a mix without listening to it and got it
Yeah.
cleared. But also that's kind of sick, and if I was making
Yeah.
$4,000 a mix, that would be pretty cool.
Yeah, right.
I would
Also,
hit
what
render
a
as many
flex.
times a day as I could.
You know what's interesting too about like working with artists is that, and I'm sure you guys have experienced this, but the ones who are gonna like who are ready to pay you right up front, the ones that like they're good with whatever they're like, yeah, I'll make like these 2 tweaks and then I'm like good to go. It
That's
feels
my
like there's a
favorite.
certain caliber of artist who's like who understands what they're getting into when they work with you, and they just kind of like hand you your project and then they're good. Yeah.
Yeah,
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 those are
I
also the easiest projects, generally
Yeah.
speaking. And you're getting generally not the best tracks, but like some of the easier to work with.
Right.
You understand the song better most of the time too.
Right. Yeah.
I found. I've had situations like that where I'll get a thing and then I get a screenshot of just like notes and I'm like, oh God.
Yeah.
Oh God. And like the mix is good. Like, what are you guys doing?
Right.
Like, I know it's good. I've showed it to like 4 or 5 other people before I even shown it to you that I respect. And they're like, yeah, this is sick. And I get a screenshot of like 10 notes and I'm like, oh God.
Yeah. Right. Right.
So let's get a little more like into what your workflow is. So like you said you're fully in the box.
Mm-hmm.
What are you DAW of choice, kind of what genres are you generally leaning towards when you produce things like that?
Yeah. I'm using Logic. It was just such a natural transition from GarageBand, which was what I was like
Gotcha.
learning how to do demos on. I've definitely been in many sessions, Pro Tools sessions as an artist, as a, when I was in a band. So like, I feel like if I had Pro Tools, I could figure my way around there. But I think Logic is great for creators, songwriters. So that's what I use. I've got just an Apollo Twin, and just a few like key mics. I got this SD1 last year, and the Hemisphere thing. I don't know if you guys are using any of like Universal's like mic modeling stuff.
Yeah, Lee lives and dies by that.
Okay.
The
He
Sphere.
takes it everywhere that he goes. He just did a drum session with Matt Goldman, and like he brought that along and used it, and it sounded so sick.
Yeah.
He's like, I was able to make 3 drum rooms from one track.
Yeah.
And like, it's so cool.
Yeah, so it's like pretty lean. I mean, you see the guitars behind me. I play bass, I play ukulele a little bit. Like I have everything I need to be able to create a song. Like there's not a shortage of like, oh shoot, I need a harmonica. Well, I have harmonicas here. Like it's just
Yeah.
I just kind of have it all at my fingertips. That doesn't mean I'm an expert at any of it, but it's a typically I can like play something well enough to add the like color or the vibe that I'm trying to get out of that instrument. But yeah, I mean, like song wise, production wise, doing because of the sync projects, doing a lot in like pop and R&B, because that's where I'll say, like, when you find a lane a little bit, or you find success with a couple songs, and those other opportunities come, they tend to be looking for what you've already done, right? So now I'm kind of in this like pop lane, which is fine because I like it a lot. But if I were doing like an artist project, it would be more like Americana leaning, or maybe a little bit more rock leaning again. But yeah, and I have done some rock stuff for sync as well. Producing other artists tends to be like in the singer songwriter and pop rock kind of spaces. Aside from a couple of one off projects, like I haven't done a ton of hip hop. And certainly like no one is coming to me for metal, or like anything harder. It's just like not my zone of genius, I
Sure.
guess.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Are you mixing at all, or are you mainly just producing?
So in the last year, it's been a major focus of mine is to learn how to mix. And for the artists that I'm working for, I tend to give them an option. I say like, hey, this is like the level of mix that you're going to get from me. This is the quality that you'd get. I can connect you with someone who's going to give you a better quality mix than this. It's going to be twice as expensive, but like, like I have those people in my network. So I've been doing that really intentionally because I want to be good. I want to be so self-contained that like I can just create something really pro myself. I love collaborating with people, but when like speed is kind of the name of the game sometimes with sync. So I want to have all the skills I need to just kind of turn stuff around. So I've seen crazy improvement. I mean, like it's funny because I look back at my mixes even like 6 months ago. I'm like, oh, that's trash, and it just is to me a sign of like all the stuff I've picked up over the years.
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely a huge focus of mine is like trying to get better at that.
Yeah. Are you mixing the stuff that you're sending out for sync, or is that normally going through somebody else?
So there has
it
been
depend?
stuff that I've mixed for sync, but yeah, I typically send it to someone else.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah.
No, that's very cool. Yeah. I mean, it's good to know that it's like you're working towards the self-contained part, but like you're not hindered because of it.
Yeah, no, I just want to get it done. It's like, I want to do a good job. I want it to sound great. So what are the best chances of that? And like, cool if I can do it on my own, but yeah, I'm not going to let that stop me,
Yeah, we're doing the same thing. We like me personally, if I'm doing something by myself, I will mix it, but it would be so much cooler if I don't have to, because I don't like worrying about that. Like whenever I start a song from inception, I feel like by the time I'm done with it, like certain things are lost, and I'd much rather just have someone else deal with it.
Yeah.
When Josh says we, he means him and his production partner Lee.
Yeah, but
Lee,
whenever I'm
not me.
Okay.
Yeah, whenever I'm working with Lee, it's a little bit different because he's really good at mixing, and so we started doing that where it's like if you're working with us, like you're going to get like mixed files back,
Yeah.
and if you want to release those, then you could pay us for the mix, well, him for the mix, but if not, then you're more than welcome to send it out to somebody else. But it's been kind of cool because like he just did that with the last project that we wrapped up, and the band went from being like, who are we gonna have to mix this, to them being like, wait, these mixes riff.
Yeah.
We're like, we know,
right?
he's the best.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that's a good process.
It's been interesting hearing Josh and Lee like try this new avenue, because it's only been pretty recent that you've
it's been very recent.
Like what, the last year? Not even 6 months.
Not even. We didn't really start getting projects together until like October.
Yeah, it's been pretty positive. I mean, label out the gate is pretty sick. So
yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, label gigs. That's where it's at.
Yeah. So hopefully,
sometimes,
hopefully we get to do the next one.
Yeah,
It was,
sometimes.
I don't know. I don't want to talk about it too much because nothing's out, but it was kind of like a weird process. We got brought in at the end of the project, so the rest of the album was done, and
They
then
Oh,
they
got they
wanted,
were batting cleanup.
yeah, and so like then they wanted three more songs plus another one just in case,
mm-hmm.
and so like the budget's gone,
Yeah.
and so like it was like a huge crunch. We did like four songs in 6 days, and like we couldn't get files from the one producer who like started the one song, and like so I had to like recreate all of the production files, which I think came out better. And it was just a really weird kind of process, but it was really fun.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I feel like if I was handed that, like a year ago, I probably would have fumbled it, but it came out way better than I had
Well,
even hoped.
and now
So
you know that like you were able to kind of save the day, right? So to me, that's like a confidence booster for any other project that you have. Is like, all right, like been there. I think I got this.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Like he was giving me the details, and I was like, all of these are like the kind of thing I would typically say no to, but like we're gonna do it, and it's gonna be great, and it is great. So
Yeah.
I'm very grateful.
That's
Well, and
awesome.
on top of that, though, like the band was so easy to work with,
Yeah.
and they were like so cool with me being like that sucks, and they weren't afraid to tell me if something sucks, and like it was just like really cool. Like I didn't have to fight with anybody, which was great, because especially because like there were four other opinions on top of like me and Lee's, so
Right.
it was really nice. And everybody just like knocked the parts out, and we still had time to like play around with like pedals and synths and do fun things, and you know
It
ate a
also
lot of
helps that
fast food.
they're great players as well.
Yeah. Hey, that goes a
Like
long way.
that goes a long way, especially when you're on that big of a time crunch. Like that's a big deal, especially on the vocal side.
Dude,
Yeah.
the vocalist, his voice was still messed up from their last tour.
And he nails it,
And
I'm sure.
and it was hilarious because he's like in there and he's like, dude, this sucks. Like this sucks. I'm bad. And I was like, hey man, don't think about what you're hearing. Like make sure you feel it. And like immediately he's like knocking out the best takes
Wow.
I've ever heard. And he's like, that was bad. And we're like, no, it was not bad. So it was cool, like, having to be like, no, that was really good, instead of being like, no, you have to sing it better.
Yeah. Right. Right. Better position to be in there.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
always easier going the other way. So
Yeah. So okay, let's dive in last little segment here. Let's talk production or like songwriting or those kind of tips or tricks. What's something that you've been stoked on as far as, did you find a new plugin that you've been really stoked on? Did you find a new songwriting trick or melody trick or weird thing in Logic that you're like stoked on?
Mm-hmm.
What's something in that kind of avenue?
Yeah, like from a plugin perspective, I've been, it's funny. I was like, I'm one of those people that's like, oh yeah, I need that, even though I don't. I already have
Yeah.
something that like kind of does the same thing. But something that I think actually has made a difference is I picked up that Sound City like reverb thing. Oh
yes,
man,
no, that's the best thing in that. Okay, yeah, no, that came out and it like changed my life.
yeah.
It not only it's probably the best like convolution reverb out there,
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, that's been all over everything that we've been working on.
It's
And it's nuts because if you hear a sound and you're like, oh yeah, that room sounds really good, there's more than likely a preset in Sound City that sounds extremely close.
right, right.
It's so
And
sick.
I think like, along my journey of trying to figure out mixing, my ear wasn't sensitive enough a year ago to think about room sound. It was just like, okay,
Yeah.
here's the part and I play this and whatever. And so it's been really exciting because I feel like not only is it a great tool, but it's like unlocked I've like recently unlocked this thing and now I'm just like playing with it all the time. So that's been really
Having
cool.
a good reverb will
Yeah.
change the game for you mentally.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was something that I realized I was missing, but I never identified that I was missing.
Yeah.
Because Lee would always use the sunset sound from
Which I love
T-Rex.
that one too.
And it sounds great, but it was also like every time I heard it, I was like, I have things that sound like this. I don't need that.
Yeah.
But then when Sound City came out and I
Mhm.
updated, I was like, completely blown away.
Yeah, that's
And
awesome.
it goes on everything now.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. I also got that. You mentioned Safari earlier. I got their reverb. They've been hitting me with that ad. I'm sure you guys have seen it. There's like some ad that they just keep doing with this drum. They've got these live
Yeah.
drums and they put the reverb on it. So I got that. And
Yeah,
like some
they're a podcast sponsor.
Oh,
Yeah.
cool. What's up, Safari
Yeah,
guys?
they're fantastic. They're actually going to be at NAMM, which is super sick because I didn't know that they were going to be at NAMM, and I was
Because
just talking
they're
about
from
them.
Israel.
Yeah, they're from Israel.
Oh, wow.
Like the owner was like sending us plugins like while his country was being attacked, which was nuts.
Yeah.
And now he's going to NAMM in California. And I was literally just talking about them because in the one Discord I'm in, this dude's like, "Hey, I'm setting up interviews with plugin companies," and someone mentioned Safari, and I was like, "Wait, are they going to NAMM?" Because like they're a brand new company, I think,
Yeah.
Yeah,
right?
they're super new.
Well, they've got a lot of cool stuff. That's the only thing I own from them is that reverb. That what is it called? It's
I
like
would
Pink
recommend
Flamingo, I think, or something.
the Flamingo Verb.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's
yeah.
sick. I would recommend the Rhino one is really cool. I
Okay.
really like it. And Josh really liked I think it was the Dirty Dog.
The Dirty Dog is gnarly.
Yeah.
It's a gated, distorted reverb.
Oh, cool.
On both ends. So it's got a pre and post gain, like distortion modules on each side.
Cool.
Yeah, and a pre-post gate, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
And then the Gorilla Drive is really cool.
If you like old sounding guitars.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like a
right.
fuzz kind of thing. I think it's based on like a Germanian fuzz, so probably like an old Big Muff or something like that.
Yeah.
It's really cool.
Well, yeah, I'll have to branch out and grab some of those. I've also got like a few more like sound designy things. I got the Baby Audio Transit, and I play with that all the time now.
Andrew Wong.
Yeah, yeah. You just gotta mess your stuff up, you know. So
know,
that
man.
whatever that kind of little stuff from a plugin perspective. Yeah, like production wise, I'm like so big on just taking in all of the content in the world. So like
Yeah.
listening to your podcast or watching videos from Make Pop Music or whatever, like just trying to consume and learn new tricks. So I feel like every week there's a new thing that I'm trying to learn how to do.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I'm trying to think from like a songwriter perspective. I want to make sure it with sync you're writing lyrics that are sometimes a little like you're trying to build a puzzle. You know that it's the home is going to be like a drama on CBS or something, right? And so you have to like say certain things in your lyrical content to make it fit for that placement type, and that can be cool. Like it's nice to have parameters, but it's also sometimes it makes what you create just kind of like stale or trite. It's like, oh, I've said this a million times. So
Musical
really trying to be intentional about lyrical content and still making sure it has depth and value, particularly on the sync side.
Yeah, that's interesting thought. I never thought about the fact that like if you get hit up for 3 dramas, those lyrics have to feel different but the same at the same time.
Right.
And like it's really easy to fall into the same lyrical turns of phrase for pieces.
Exactly.
Did you guys, I'm sorry, this is very ADHD thought. Did you guys watch Daisy Jones and the Six?
No, I saw like one episode of it. I haven't watched it.
So it's great.
Yeah.
Right? But I can't get over how awful the music is. Like everything about the songs is not only horrible, but then the lyrics are some of the worst that I have ever heard in my life.
Yeah.
And it kind of like they did a good job at making everything feel very immersive and feel very real. But then as soon as you see the dude singing those lyrics to a huge crowd, it's like, nah, dude, like I get it. It's supposed to be like the 70s, but like people weren't that dumb back then.
Yeah.
Like they would have been like, no, this is whack. And that's been on my mind. Like there's so many like specifically in film, I don't know why. Anytime there's like original songs for film, like the songs just kind of don't hit the same way as like music that like we actually listen to.
Yeah, right.
And that has been driving me crazy. But for some reason, every time like there's like I always think there was this one song in one of the NHL games that would play only in the arena, and it was like in between periods.
Mhm.
And so I was like, man, this song is so catchy. What is it? So I went through the original soundtrack. It wasn't in there. I checked all of like the user made playlists on Spotify for the game. Wasn't on there. I checked the depths of Reddit, and nobody could come up with this. And I realized it was literally just like a sync song that they probably picked up.
Yep.
And because of that, I will never get to listen to it. And I'm very upset because the song was awesome.
It's frustrating.
It
Like,
was so good.
there are definitely people on Reddit, on YouTube, who are like about the Life is Strange game, and they're like, I need to know what the song is. Why can't I find this song? And it's tricky because with it being tied to a library, sometimes libraries will let you put out records with your name attached to it, but other times it's like a compilation, and so like they can't search for you. If they search your name, like they're not going to find your stuff on streaming. So I've like had to take to YouTube and like go and comment on everybody, if they're asking questions about like, who is this? What is this song? I like go and comment, which is a little bit time consuming, but I want to make sure that they can find it.
Yeah, you're doing the Lord's work. I wish somebody would have done that for whatever song was in NHL 21.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's great.
Yeah.
No, that's really cool. The last thing I will ask is, I got two things for you. I normally do. What's something that you've just been like really stoked on, like musically, like listening wise? If you've been listening to something, it can be old, it can be new, it can just be like whatever you've been like. I've been really into Counting Crows the last week for some reason. Something like that.
Yeah.
That's number one. And then number two is like something that you feel is underrated musically.
Ooh, underrated. Well, so the first question, I really loved that Boy Genius record that came out this year. And
it was really good.
Last year. Rather. Yeah, really good. Like mixed super well. It's interesting. I think for me personally, like they had a lot of women working on that record, which is kind of rare. So I just like, that was cool to see.
Yeah. Good story behind it as well, like that. Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, so like, and that was great. And I'm not typically, sort of like that, for lack of a better term, like that sad girl rock is not typically what I listen to, but I just really loved it. The lyrical content's awesome. Like, I just thought they did a great job. So really loved that.
Arguably three of the greatest, like, younger songwriters
big time
in one group. Yeah.
Yeah, like how do you put that they thought to put themselves together? And in fact, I almost feel like now, like, is Boy Genius gonna supersede the individual contributions of is that gonna be better over the long term?
Potentially.
But, yeah, so like that, they've been super interesting to me. And then underrated, it's hard for me. I feel like I'm kind of the type of person who feels like there are no guilty pleasure type things. So for me, I don't know that I necessarily think about like underrated. I don't know.
Underrated for me means more of like you don't see them getting enough love or hype.
Yeah. Man, there was this group. I haven't heard from them in a minute, so I don't know if they're even still together. But there was this group. Oh shoot, what is I'm gonna blank on their name.
Yeah, pull it up.
Yeah, I saw this band live that I thought was awesome. And actually, there's a theme brewing here, which is like 3-part harmonies with women. But oh shit, sorry, I don't mean to swear on your podcast.
You're allowed.
See if I can.
Josh
find it.
swore within the first 5 seconds of the last episode. So.
I know. And then
funny.
Yeah, and then I said, "Man, I hope my mom doesn't listen to this."
Oh my god,
so funny.
Yeah, moms are never thrilled with that, right?
Killing my YouTube monetization, Josh.
I'm sorry. Hey, you can beat me out.
No, I already posted it. It went up.
You got to do, or like we could do like weird sound effects, like a cow mooing.
I'll do a rubber duck.
Yeah,
or like the rubber chicken.
Yeah, that would be cool. That's what I sound like in the morning trying to get out of bed.
Yeah.
Well, I can't find this. I don't know why I'm like blanking so hard on this, but I will find. There it is. The Wild Reeds.
Okay.
I think they're out of California, but they did this really cool blend of like, you know, if you're into like, speaking of Daisy Jones and the Six, if you're into like Fleetwood Mac or that kind of like California pop thing with really great harmonies, the Wild Reeds are awesome.
Like
Um,
soft rock, big
yeah, it's
harmonies,
right.
kind
It's
of
not,
chill Americana almost.
yeah, and it's not like when you say soft rock, I almost think of like yacht rock. It's not quite that, you know, but it's like
Yeah.
I don't know. They're just a really cool group. Good lyrics, but I saw them live at Musica in Akron, this like small club in Akron. And I was like, "Ooh, this band should be getting more love."
I'm adding it
Yeah.
to my recent. What would you recommend listening to?
Oh, so they've got one song that's like pretty emotional that is a go-to. And of course I don't remember the name. Everything Looks Better in Hindsight is great. If I'm going to yeah, Fix You Up. If you look at The World We Built, Fix You Up is great.
Okay.
Um
I'm just gonna add that whole record
yeah, only
and just
songs
check
from
it out.
there is great. You know, it's interesting. And they did this awesome cover of Surfer Girl by the Beach Boys.
Heck
Um
yeah.
yeah, like they're just I don't know, they're just like
That's
really in
really
that
cool.
California pop zone, but they're great.
Yeah. No, that's really cool. Well, Steph, thanks so much for coming and hanging out with us today. If you want to, people want to find you, where can they check you out and
Yeah,
contact you?
my website is stephtrivison.com and I'm you can probably most readily find me on Instagram at Steph Trivison Music.
Awesome. Well, Steph, thanks so much for coming and hanging out with us today.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. This was super fun.
Yeah, and listener, thank you so much for listening, and we will see you guys on the next one. See ya.